So today we continue with Job. Yesterday we looked at the argument of Eliphaz and then Job's response. The idea that Eliphaz goes off and he's really more the theologian. He's telling people about how it is, and he even mentions how the gray-headed men are with us, men older than your dad. So he's Xeroxing his theology. All of this makes sense in their little echo chamber. Job has actually looked at the nature. Job has looked at God through other things, not just men's philosophical viewpoints. And interesting how if you watch these arguments, some people will talk themselves into a corner. Eliphaz goes and talks about how that older men are with him, and we have counsel from them older than your dad. Then he turns around and says, God puts no trust in his saints, yet the heavens are not clean in his sight. How much more abominable and filthy is man which drinketh iniquity like water. Which one is it? We can either trust man to tell us about God, or a man is filled with iniquity and separated from God. You can't have it both ways. And again, he goes into how God, how wicked men, he's only looking at it myopically about, well, I've seen wicked men, and these things happen to the wicked, and this happens to the wicked. Job's response is that I've seen the wicked grow. I've seen the wicked have more abundance. I've seen the wicked go up and not just down. It's like God's hand is against the wicked, but he is for the just. That's been the argument from the beginning. Job goes around and tells them they're miserable comforters, and he talks about how that God has delivered him into the ungodly, and how was at ease, but you've broken me asunder. His archers are compassed about me. He says that God comes out at him like a giant. His arrows encompass me. That he says he's delivered me to other people, over to the hands of the wicked, that even they tear at him, even they gnash at him. He even goes back to that some more. Oh, that one would plead with a man, for a man with God as one pleadeth with his neighbor. If he could actually go and talk to God about these things, but God will do what God wants to do. Now, we know we have this intercessor, but average man at that time didn't have an intercessor. It was kind of a one-way street in a sense of, you have sins, you do burn offerings, that's fine. But when the intercessor came, which is Christ, now we have we have an advocate that we can actually talk with God. So here we have this, and he's talking about, how can man be just? How can you be just? If you're just, hypothetically, then you're doing good according to you. But if you're unjust, how do you be just? And if all men are unjust, how does any man become just? Again, the cyclic illogic, the cognitive dissonance of Eliphaz and his friends is just startling. My breath is corrupt. The grave is ready for me. He spends, like I said, I'm going over 17 a little bit, where he just talks about how that I can't find one wise man among you. Not one man understands what I'm saying. You're in your own little role. But I'm ready to go. If this is the end of it, I'm fine. If God wants to tear me under, but I will trust in him. Though he slay me, I will trust in him. Bildad comes up to talk. And again, Bildad, how long will you err? Make it end of words. Mark, and therefore we will speak. So stop and we'll speak. How long are you just going to be talking? And you're just talking. You're not making any sense. Are we counted as a beast? And are we vile in your sight? Yea, the light of the wicked shall be put out, and the spark of the fire shall not shine. The light of his darkness in his tabernacle, and his candle shall be put out with him. The idea that, no, this was going back to that same mantra, that same trope about this is what happens to him. Terror shall make him afraid on every side. His strength shall be hunger bitten. It shall devour the strength of his flesh. His confidence shall be rooted out of his tabernacle, and he shall be to the kings of terrors. It shall dwell in his tabernacle, because it is none of his. Brimstone shall be scattered upon his habitation. The idea of judgment, fire, brimstone. His remembrance, this is funny, I had to laugh when I first read this. His remembrance shall perish from the earth, and he shall have no name in the street. He shall be driven from light into darkness, and chased out of the world. He shall neither have son nor nephew among his people, nor any remaining in his dwellings. This is harshness. They're so harsh about this. Did they really see this? Did they really see that the evil were so destroyed that they were wiped out like a dish? And then he says, they that come after him shall be astonished at his day. And they, as they went before and were affrighted. Now, wait a minute. I thought you said this guy was going to be wiped out and not remembered. Yet you're saying people will remember him and be astonished. Which one is it, Bildad? Again, you and Eliphaz have this cognitive dissonance going. Surely such are the dwellings of the wicked, and the place of him that knoweth not God. Basically, they're saying you don't know God. You don't know God if you're saying this. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit heads up. I went ahead and read the last chapter where God comes at them and says, my wrath is kindled against you and against your two friends, he says this to Eliphaz. For ye have not spoken the thing that is right, as my servant Job has. So, giving you a little bit of a 411, these guys are not speaking correctly of God. And that's what God wants. Are we so light in our theologies, are so willing to Xerox, so willing to take, well, what does the pastor say, or what does this book say, or what does this theologian say, or what does this concordance say? The reason why I'm doing this Bible study is to do the grid work myself so that I can be like Job. Job was a nomad. And sometimes when you do grid work and you talk with people, it's like you are talking two different languages. They don't understand. They have their framework. There's cognitive dissonance. There's things that don't make sense, and they don't want to discuss it. You'll notice that these arguments of these guys, they're about the same. Now, Job gives us some insight in 19. How long will you vex my soul? These 10 times you have reproached me. You are not ashamed that you shall make yourself strange to me. And be it indeed that I have erred, mine error remains with myself. So we nomads, if we get it wrong, we're just going to be wrong ourselves. I'm not going to be wrong because I've Xeroxed somebody else. More times in my life, I found myself being wrong when I Xerox somebody else on how something's supposed to be, or you just buy this, it'll be fine, or this is how this part fits. Yesterday, I went out and bought a used car for my son from a dealership. You better make sure that you're making all the decisions and not letting them make decisions. They can decide how much they want to ask for it. You can decide whether you want to take it or not. Don't let them ever sell you it's a good deal. You buy that. You sell yourself the car is what you're doing. But here we have Job stepping back. I know that God shall overturn me and shall encompass me with his net. Therefore I cry out of wrong, but I am not heard. I cry aloud, but there is no judgment. He has fenced up my ways, and I cannot pass. He has set darkness in my paths. He has stripped me of my glory and taken the crown from my head. He has destroyed me on every side. He goes through this chapter, and that's what he's doing. He's talking about what God has done to him. Again, this is very similar to 17, or 16, I should say, where he talked about, God was like a giant, and God's got him, and he's still saying the facts haven't changed. Your rhetoric, your theologies, your belief hasn't changed the facts that he has encompassed me. He's shooting me with his arrows. He is taking me like a rag doll. He's shaking me like a bear or a lion would shake prey. All these things are happening to me. He says, even gives us more insight. My kinfolk have failed, and familiar friends have forgotten me. They dwell in my house, and my maids count me as a stranger. The servant girls, they just walk right by, I called my servant, and he gave me no answer. My breath is strange to my wife, though I entreated for her the children's sake of my own body. Although we had children from our own body, this wasn't a woman that I married that had another man's children. We had children together, and yet now she treats me as strange. My bone cleaves to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped with the skin of my teeth. The idea that all of these people also, there's no neutral here. That's what he's trying to get across. I never said neutral, and people went, whatever. They were always against him. They always had to come rag with him. They always had to come and pick at him. They always had, or ignore him, and obviously ignore. The idea that people that knew you now count you as a stranger. And he also talks about the violence. Again, over in 16, they gape at me with their mouths. They have spit me upon the cheek reproachfully. The idea of people come over and just hitting you. Again, treating you with reproach. This is what God, if God's done this to you, then we're going to do it too. You are a mean person. Obviously, he's a great sinner. Look how God has turned against him. You see, that's been the argument. And he gives us more insight here in 19. Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were printed in a book. His words were written, and they were printed in a book. One thing I'll comment on Bildad real quick is that he said that Job's remembrance would perish from the earth. And I asked my wife today, I said, you ever heard of Job? She goes, of course, everybody has. Have you ever heard of Bildad? And she's like, who? The very guy that said that is unknown 4,000 years later. And yet, here is Job, well known by everybody. Even all sinners know Job. Job is all over our culture. So Job is giving us more insight into this. And so he talks about his skin. But you say, why persecute we him, seeing the root of the matter is found in me? Be ye afraid of the sword, for the wrath bringeth the punishments of the sword, that you may know that there is judgment. You should say, why persecute we him, seeing that the matter is found in him? But be afraid of the sword. This is what Job says. Be afraid of the sword, for the sword bringeth punishments, because that's going to be the justice. God's going to come at you with swords. Now what happens is, at the very end, going to the end, Job prays for them, does the burnt offerings for them, and God forgives them. But the judgment was coming. Just because God wasn't judging men now for getting him wrong doesn't mean he won't do it later. And even we Christians, we think that, well, if I've got Christ right, then I get everything else right. No, it's our job in sanctification to make sure that we rightly divide the word of truth. That we study the scriptures daily to see if the things are so. There's so much in here. Rightly dividing implies strongly that you can wrongly divide. In fact, we have 1st and 2nd Corinthians, we have Galatians and Romans are giving you right theology, because at the time the church had wrong theology. Right off the bat, they were getting things wrong. And God sent Paul to straighten up the mess. And Peter did a good job of it, so did Timothy, or the book of Timothy. 2 Timothy gives us information. My point is, here's Job finishing it out, give us more and it's getting to where he's not even defending the argument anymore. But he will come back at this. He has a long discourse coming. Tomorrow is Zophar and his response to Zophar. Then comes back Eliphaz. Then Job. Then we have a little bitty bit, 6 little verses of Bildad. He's got to still put that in. I'm still right. No matter what you say, I'm still right. And then Job gives a discourse. Then here comes Elihu. Then here comes God. But we see these arguments back and forth, and it's really something to see that it gets to where he goes on to give insight here, and he's getting to where the argument's getting old. He says, 10 times you've come at me to be righteous in your own eyes. 10 times you've been tearing at me. You reproach me to say I'm wrong. 10 times you've done this. So we're getting more insight in 19. Tomorrow we'll look at Zophar. The next day, Eliphaz and Bildad. Try to get all those together. And like I said, go on to Job, Elihu, God. And we'll finish this up. But the idea of seeing this whole argumentative structure and seeing these guys, don't think like Eliphaz. Don't think like Bildad. Don't think like Zophar. And for gosh sakes, once you find out about Elihu, stay away from that guy. He is a mess. So we'll keep moving. I'm really enjoying this. This is a lot of fun. Thank you.